G'day, Facebook. How do you find your unique recipe without gurus, without influencers? So I want to share with you, there's so much on the market about, what programs you can buy, what kind of ways you strategies, sales, marketing that you can do, just to get your results for whatever it is that you want to do, your career, your business, your profession. And here's what I want to share with you. Each and every single one of us has our own recipe for achieving based on our own God-given compass. So what do I mean by that? So I want you to think of a time, go back in your memory bank and think of a time that you achieved something. You achieved something that you were pretty chuffed about. And it doesn't have to be something huge. It can be something as simple as, for example, when I was in year 11 at high school, I really wanted to compete in this competition called the Plain English Speaking Competition. It was a public speaking thing. And year 11 was my last year that I could compete in it, because the next year would be year 12 and you were exempt. You couldn't do it because it was your final year and you had to concentrate on your studies. So year 11 was my only year that I could actually go and compete. It was my last chance. So I went to compete. Now, I didn't win that competition. I didn't do too well in that competition, but what I did achieve is me getting over my own obsessive thoughts about, well, what if I can't speak, because I'd never done a speaking presentation before. What if I can't speak? I'm going to be in front of all my friends and all my peers. I'm going to have other schools around me. What if I can't get the words out? What if what I'm saying is not making sense? What if I can't find the right speech? All these thoughts are coming up. So put that in its place. For example, if you're starting a business or changing careers or starting a degree, like all the thought process, what if that happens? What if that happens? What if I don't do that? What if I can't do that? What if I don't measure up? What if people are so much better than me? So all that thought thinking that was taking place, I somehow got over myself and was able to compete in the second round of the English speaking. It's a funny story, but I just want to keep to point here. So I go and I compete. Now, what that meant for me was when I was able to do that, when I was able to go and compete in that competition, even though I didn't win the competition, the fact that I got over my own self-doubt, my own self-deprecating thinking about everything that could go wrong, the fact that I got over that and was able to stand on that stage and deliver something, some words came out of my mouth, was an achievement for me. So what I'm asking you, my invitation to you is to go back in your memory bank and think of a time that you achieved based on your interpretation of achievement. Because that to someone else may have been nothing. But for me, it was a huge deal because I got over so much overthinking in myself to get myself to that point. But what happened for me to get myself to that point? So what I did was I then looked at, I reverse engineered what was the steps that I took unconsciously that allowed me to finally get up on that stage and to get words out of my mouth and to speak in this speaking competition that I always wanted to compete in. And I actually wrote this out and I've actually got it on my wall. I've actually got my steps. You're not going to believe it, but I've got the steps on my wall. Can you see that? You can't see it. There you go. Can you see that? Right there. There's a piece of paper. There's a piece of paper right there, and I have that in front of me. And the reason why I have that in front of me, to remind myself of my own recipe, of what I need specifically that allows me to go to progress mode, that allows me to go to achievement mode, that allows me that process of happiness to get to where I want to be. So for me, remember, this is not a huge, big, fat thing that I conquered, but it was big enough for me to know that I progressed, that I achieved. So what's really important for you is when you're picking something of what you've achieved, it doesn't have to be by anyone else's standards but your own, because only you can measure your own progress. Only you can measure your own level of growth. And that's important because your opinion, your voice in this matters huge for you to be able to find your recipe. So my recipe on my wall, so what are the steps that it took me to get to that point of speaking in that competition? Well, I challenged myself. It was a challenge for me. I hadn't spoken before. I hadn't done a speech before. Heck, I didn't even have a speech prepared until moments before I got up and spoke. It's a true, I have to do like a whole other video on that because it's a really funny story. But I challenged myself. I knew it was my challenge. right? The second thing I had is that I looked at the goal every single day. Like I looked at it, I wrote it down that I wanted to compete in this competition, and I wrote it down and I looked at it every single day. The third thing that I did is that I felt unsure. Like every time I looked at this goal, I was like, I don't know what to talk about. I don't know what to write. I can't even bring myself to write a speech. So for me, feeling unsure is my way of knowing that I'm progressing, that I'm getting closer to something. It's my recipe, remember. Remember, that's why it's important to find your recipe. The fourth thing is I had notes. I had palm notes. So on the day when I did my talk, I had written a few notes so that I could prompt myself and remind myself about what I was speaking about. So that's another thing. The other thing I had is that I had a why. My why was that my friends were going to be in that audience. People, strangers, my peer, like at 15, 16, like peer pressure matters, right? So I had my peers that I didn't even know from other schools who I was going to see at the train station, at the bus stops when I was going to and from school. I would see all these people, see all these students. And it mattered that I would do a good enough job so I wouldn't embarrass myself in front of my friends and my peers. The other thing I had was accountability. I wrote down that I was accountable to my teacher because my teacher took a huge, my teacher took a risk by saying that she would take me to the competition. And so I didn't want to let my teacher down because she could have said no to me. So I didn't want to let her down. So I had accountability to her. I had a deadline. There was the competition date and I couldn't get out of it. So what I'm trying to say here is that's my recipe. What you need to do is find that thing that you do well in or that you did well. And remember, I didn't conquer anything. I just overcame a huge, big limitation. And that was an achievement for me. And all I did was I looked at what were the steps. I reversed engineered the process of what were the steps that I did that led me to that moment of conquering one of my biggest fears. And I just read you my recipe. Now, what's yours? I invite you to do this exercise because this tag word that's going around right now called self-awareness, about knowing yourself, this is how you're going to know about knowing who you really are in terms of what you're capable of, in terms of your specific recipe. Because when you go and buy an online program or an offline program or the next sales thing or you go to the next seminar, what someone's actually teaching you, hopefully, what they're teaching you is their recipe for success. What they're teaching you is how they did it, and they're just going to show you how they did it. So why don't you work out how you did it for yourself? Now, what you want to do, and this is where it becomes useful, is once you have in your memory bank what you achieved, what you did well in, you reverse engineer the steps, like what happened to get to that point. Now, when you look at your next goal, say it's to start a business or to change your careers or turn your passion into a profession, whatever it is, now when you look at that, you just employ your recipe. Like you just employ your recipe. You work on your own recipe because that worked for you before. And then if that needs tweaking, if that needs refining, now you know what you need to do, what areas you need to improve on, what you need to upskill to gain the specific coach or book or event or friend that you need to recruit into the conversation to help you get to the next level of goal. But first, you've got to know your own foundation and recipe. And once you know that, guess how much confidence that injects in you. And now there's a reason why I've got my recipe just stuck right in front of me. So it always reminds me, because in that process of feeling unsure and feeling scared, I know that's normal for me. I know that's in my recipe. Right? It's like, when you're cooking something and you fry some onions, then you put some spices in, and then say you put some tomatoes in, say you're making a soup, you put some tomatoes in, but you could fry some onions and put some spices and put some tomatoes in, but then you haven't seasoned it with salt and pepper and you taste it without seasoning it. It doesn't taste all that good, right? It doesn't taste it, but it doesn't mean you put the whole thing in the bin. You got to add the salt, you got to add the pepper for it to taste nice. And so it's the same thing for me. If my recipe is if I'm doing things and I'm feeling unsure, if I'm feeling uncertain, it's not for me to say, no, I can't do this, throw it in the bin. I've got to wait. I've got to add my spices. I've got to add my salt and pepper to it, which means I need to keep going. That's my salt and pepper to my recipe. And I'm sharing this with you because it's a huge aha moment for me, because once I recognize what my recipe is, I know, like day in, day out, I feel unsure. I feel unsure about what I'm doing, my goals. I feel unsure the fact that I'm doing this alone. I feel unsure that I'm alone in the work that I'm doing, because I love being around people. I get energy from people. And when I'm not around people, I know that when I go into that mindset of, I'm not sure if I can do this, I feel like, am I doing it correctly? When I get into that, that's when I specifically know that I'm on the right track, because my recipe tells me so. And so if you could, and I'm going to repeat it one more time, if you can go back into your memory bank and pick a time that you did okay. And I just mentioned mine when I was like 15, 16 at school, which was nothing, right? And that's why I gave you that example, because you don't have to do anything other than have your level, your standard of progress, your standard of getting over yourself. When you can find that for you, reverse engineer the process, look at what are the steps that you took to get to that overcoming, and now deploy that same recipe to the next big thing that you want to do. And then you've got that recipe, so you don't need to go to anyone else. But now that if you need to upskill, you know specifically what to look for, rather than getting like sidetracked with shiny object syndrome. And then that's how you build. That's how you build it out. And I wanted to share that with you because it's such a huge thing. If you could do that for yourself, and when you do that, please share with me your results. Please share me what you found out, what insights you took away from yourself. Like, what did you build a self-awareness around? How did you get to know yourself better? What was your recipe? Like, what's the thinking? What's the feelings that you have that you need to get comfortable with, because that's telling you that you're on the right track versus, do I need to put it in the bin? Share it with me. And if you think that someone could really benefit from knowing, like if they've been doing something for ages, if they've been on their business or on their career and things aren't working out for them, then please share this video with them, because this could be their aha. This could be their moment of understanding exactly why they haven't, because they just need to get clear on what already works for them, what already has worked for them. And once they can get that down, then they just build from the foundation that they know best, which is themselves, versus looking to someone else for the answers. So please go ahead and share. I'd love to hear from you about how you are going to use this and what insights you take. So get a pen and paper, write down an experience, reverse engineer the process, get curious, get conscious to the steps you took, and then go and redeploy, reuse that recipe again for another goal, and let me know how it happened. And I'd love to hear from you. So wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing, please go ahead and choose that to do that, to really get to know your recipe. Because if you are online or offline and you're just buying course after course and attending event after event and listening to speaker after speaker, but you're not getting results, here's what you need to do, or the results that you want. Here's now time to get clear and get very conscious about what really works for you. And this method is really going to give you insight into that. So I'm going to leave you with that, and you have a beautiful day, and I'll catch you soon.